Good evening, everyone.
Kavod Arav, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you. Good. Yeah, seems like I didn't read the whole bit Yosef yesterday, something I missed here. So I'm going to read it now. It says here, right, we talked about yesterday about measuring the barley to give to your animal. So regarding that, he says in Bet Yosef, the sub perek and tzadin, katwa rosh, right? It says the rosh there in this perek in the Betzah, Ve'anan on the Ran and Perush Rashi, right? Rashi explains, Perush Harif, lo yichriu, right? Right. So he says that the Rif and the Rashi didn't decide the halacha there. Rambam Perek Daled katav k'divrei Arif, but the Rambam paskins like the Rif. So what does that mean? The Rif said that you could estimate. So the Rambam says that too. Ve'im mutar limdod tavlin liten b'kedera. So now he talks about what about measuring spices, right, for your dish? So he says it was already explained, right, in one of the former chapters, earlier chapters, 400, 504. So, im modedin kemach k'dei lelush. So then also there's another thing, which is, are you allowed to measure flour in order to knead? This also was mentioned in a different chapter. So he says, right, we already covered these things before. Okay, well, that's nice. Right? So it says in the Gemara, Shabbat, Perek Shoel, Kuf Mem Tet Amud Aleph, V'so Perek Ezeh Uneshech, also this one, in Vav Metzia, Ayin Hey Amud Aleph, Am Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Bnei Chabura, HaMakpidim Zeh Zeh, right? So this is now we're beginning to talk about what we saw in the Ramah yesterday, right? Which was the issue of the lots, drawing lots, right? So he brings this from the Gemara, and he says,
Kavod Harav, I think your microphone is down a little bit.
"Oh, let me check that. Let me check that. Make sure here. What's going on? I don't know what's going on." Thanks for telling me.
You're welcome, Kavod Harav.
Okay. So let me yeah, looks like you were right. I don't know why, but it's down. Okay. So I put it back up now. Should be good. You hearing me better now?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, good. So anyway, getting back to what we said. So as we said, right, that now he talks about this issue of the lots, right? The drawing lots, whatever. So he brings this from Gemara, as we said. So if these people are makpidim zeh zeh, what does that mean? If they're particular, right, with one another, right, ovrim mishum midah, so then they're transgressing the prohibition of measuring. Mishum mishkal, also the prohibition of weighing. Mishum minyan, also right, counting numbers, whatever. Mishum lavin uporin, also right, borrowing and lending. Yom tov and yom tov. Ketibra Hillel. So he said that's like Hillel. Af mishum rabim ribit. So right. So it's according to Hillel, there's also a prohibition of interest here. Right. So we have to digest all this, right? Perish Rashi explains. Modlim kemach. I'm sorry. Yeah. So Rashi explains the perek ezeu neshech, right over there in this perek. Hamakpidim zeh al zeh shen mochalin al davar muat. So what does it mean they're particular? That they won't forgive one another. Right? In other words, for taking a little bit too much or whatever. ומקפידים להלוות זה את זה במידה, משקל ובניין. Also, right, when they lend one another some items, right? They borrow and, right? We're not talking about money. We're talking about, food, right? Whatever, stuff like that. So, they weigh it out, because, they want to make sure they know how much we're lending you, right? So I get my stuff back, the way I gave you, right? Whatever I gave you, give me back the same amount. So they're particular about that. Okay. Mishum lavin porin. Ovrin b'shabbatot b'yom tamim. So it says if they are particular like that, as we said, right? They're not so generous and liberal with each other, right? If that's the case, that's when they're transgressing these prohibitions that we mentioned. When is that? So Rashi says b'shabbatot v'yomim tovim. On Shabbat Yom Tov, they would transgress this. So, right, then he explains this issue with the borrowing and lending, right? What does that have to do with borrowing and lending? That's not Masechet Shabbat, because it says in Shabbat, Kuf Mem Chet Amud Aleph, Vivat Shelo Yomar Lo Halveni, right? As long as he doesn't tell him, like, lend me, V'atam Mefaresh Tama Hashem Yechtov, right? Because once they do it like a loan, we're concerned that they're going to write it down. This is the problem, So the rabbis decreed not to do it this way. So, right, to reiterate what we just said, what are we saying here? That if these people are particular, about their amounts, right? Whatever it is, the number, the weight, right? The measure, when they lend to one another things, when they borrow and lend. So then, they're transgressing a prohibition. Why is that? Because they didn't come to write it down because they're so particular about everything. So the rabbis decreed not to do that when you're particular. So, right, that's according to what we said yesterday. That's why you shouldn't measure everything precisely. So when you borrow something on Shabbat and Yom Tov, just like fill up the cup, and don't start now, with your measuring stick, with your measuring, measuring this, measuring that. Don't get into that stuff. Okay, so then he says, right, Ditnan, because he brings a source for this, Masechet Shabbat. Right, so we said this already. And then he says in Tosfot, Katvu Perush, they explain, מתוך שמקפידים באים לידי כך שקפידותן גורמת להם להזכיר המידה כדי שיהיה מבורר יפה, מה שמתחייב לזה, וכן מתוך שמקפידים שוקלים במאזניים. So he says, right, what happens is that Tosfot says a little bit differently. He says that the problem is that they're going to come to weigh it out because they're so particular. So it says, alternatively, they can't even measure, they can't even weigh it with their hands, just like with the weight, with the scale, the fishim and daktakim, because they're very particular. So it says, even though it says there that you're allowed in the case of the butcher, right, where he's not a professional, so therefore he's not particular about all these things, right? How much weight he gives you, how many grams it was, whatever it is, right? Also, it's forbidden to say, right? Fill up for me, this utensil. Even if you don't mention the actual size, right? Whatever the weight, whatever it is. That's the way it implies from Rashi. Right over there in this Pek in the Shabbat. So it says there, right, that if these people are particular about one another when they lend each other, Shamar Echad lechavero maneh shelakachta gedolahi. So, right, for instance, he tells, right, one person to his friend, this measure you took, right, was too much, too large. Tenli kimota, so therefore, give me back the same amount. And then he comes and, right, weighs it with his hands, Okay. Mishum minyan, because of, right, now we're talking about the numbers. Right, so let's say right there, borrowing some nuts, right, or whatever, or pecans, I don't know, God knows, right, whatever it is, right. So here also, right, almonds, right, whatever. So here also, right, we don't want them to like say the number of almonds, that you're giving him, right. So you shouldn't count it out. It's also the same problem. Right? So it tells I'm going to take 20 of them, right? 20 almonds, right? Whatever, right? So since you took 20, right? Now I'm going to take back also 20, right? We got to be fair and square, right? So that means that they're particular about that stuff. No good, right? We don't want that. Oh, Amar Bashash and Util Hamten, Ad Sheshkol Maneh, the Ad Shem Dod, right? Orech Hadagim, the Kishuim. Right, so this is also another scenario would be, he tells them when he's taking the merchandise, right? When he's borrowing it, wait till I weigh it, let's make sure we weigh it, right? This way, I'm going to give you back the same amount. or the size, right? Whatever it is, all this stuff, right? Volume, blah, 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 blah. והקישואים ואומנם והביצים באגוזים ושקדים שאתה נוטל שאטול גם אני כמשקלה וכמידתה וכמניינה, משמע שרצה לומר אף על פי גב דשאלה לומר לחנווני להרגיל אצלו תן לי 20 אגוזים. So he says he wants to say like this, right? That even though you're allowed to tell the store owner, right? Let's say you want to go and buy something from him. So you tell him, yeah, give me 20 nuts, right? זהו לפי שאין משמע שם שתהיה שום כבדה. It says because over there, there's not really any implication when you go to a store owner that there's any right that you're particular about this. על המניין, regarding the number. אלא שמודיעו שכל כך הוא צריך, just telling him that this is the amount that he needs. Right? אבל כשאומר לקחת 20 גם אני, but when you say, right, I'm not going to, just like you take 20, I'm going to take 20, right? אטול 20, מראה שמדקדק ומקפיד על מניין. So there he shows, right, that he's being particular about the number. So that's already like problematic. So therefore, right, it becomes out to be like a, weekday activity, right? That's what he calls it. Ken masao matan, right? Just like you're doing, right, bargaining, deliberation, for merchandise, so forth, so on, right? Or payment, right? Ve'enami share b'chi gavna na'amid kigon she'amar lo amten. So it says, alternatively, I can tell you that it's allowed in this way. For instance, he told him, wait till I count for you the nuts, right, whatever. That you're going to take, I'm going to take the same amount back. Right? זה במידה ומשקל אסור. This is the same thing when it comes to like weighing things like this, and all these kinds of things, or measuring, blah blah blah. והראש כתב שם שני פירושים אלו. So the Rosh brings both of these explanations, definitions, whatever. ולא הכריע ביניהם, didn't paskin, right? Which one is the halacha? גם רבנו ירוחם כתבם ולא הכריע. So he says רבנו ירוחם also wrote them. He also didn't paskin, right? Which is the halacha. אבל במסכת שבת, במסכת ביצה, but he says in these גמרות, לא הזכיר זה הראש כלל. The Rosh didn't even mention it at all, this whole thing. ונראה שהטעם מפני שהתוספות כתבו בפרק שואל, so it says, seems to me that the reason is because that the Tosfot wrote in this perek, פירוש לפי שמקפידים זה את זה, right? So Tosfot said because they're so particular about these things on each other, עוברין אפילו על מה שאין שאר בני אדם עוברין. They're transgressing even something which other people are not transgressing. משום מידה, because of measurement. זה אמינם בביצה, because we say in ביצה, יכול אדם לומר לחברו, that a person can say to his friend, מלא לי כלי זה, right? Fill up for me this utensil, אבל לא במידה, right? But don't mention the measure. פירוש כלי שמודדים בו אסור. So he says, right, that means that a utensil that we measure with, measuring utensil, is forbidden. Because it looks like you're buying and selling. והם מכיוון שהם מקפידים כל כלים הווה לגבי מידה. So he says, since they're particular, so therefore all his utensils are like measuring. לפי שמקפידים לדעת שיעורו, because they want to know the exact amount. לשלם להם הכלי, right, in order to pay them back. לכן משקל ששוקלים, it's also, he says, when you're weighing something, ומכוונים זה כנגד זה, and right, you're comparing one to the other, ואמינם בביצה. So we said in ביצה, כ"ח עמוד א', אין משגיחין במאזניים ביום טוב. It says that we don't weigh with right scale on Yom Tov. Mishum minyan, because of numbers. What about numbers? Daminan bebetza, b'senem betza chavtet amud bet. Cholech adam etzel chenmani. Says right, the person can go to a store owner, Ragiletz, right, who knows him. Beomer lo tenli, tells him like, give me this and that. But shelo yaskir lo schum nekach, as long as he doesn't, as we said, right, mention any price. Shem hayu notenin me'a egozin, because if they were giving right 100 nuts, the dinar for 1 dinar, right, which is like a certain amount of money. Right, kevar tish'im, and he already took 90. Lo yamar lo teni asara egozim, but don't tell him like, give me the 10 more, right? She'etchayev lecha asara egozim, and I'll be right to I'll have to pay you back 10. Shenireh she'oseh, because it looks like you're doing le'ashlim ha'mecher, to complete the sale. You can tell him, give me 20 nuts, stam, right, regular. So it says if these people are particular about one another, it's forbidden. Right? They're gonna mention to pay them back. Like Hillel, and also because of interest as well. So it says difficult according to this explanation. Because if Hillel is talking about a case where they're particular, only that case. So then why did he say above? Why did it say that this Mishnah is not like Hillel? So therefore it seems to explain. He says, they're transgressing because of measuring and because of mishkal, or weighing. So it says they're close to coming to that prohibition. They transgress because of measuring. Because since they're particular one on the other, and they're also right, they take with a measuring cup, whatever. So they can do that as well on Yom Tov as well. So he says everybody is forbidden to use a measuring utensil. Like we said, but he says the ones who are particular, gives them advice, that they should not write they shouldn't combine together, right, because they're coming close to approaching the prohibition of measuring. So it's also, there's also a prohibition of mishkal, of weighing. Because they're accustomed to weigh everything, right? Because they're particular. Gam b'yom tov, also in Yom Tov, lo yargishu ad sheishkelu. So they won't they won't pay attention to this until they come to weighing it. And they're going to count it out. So when one of them is going to remain with him 60 nuts, Yomar lo tenli arba'im l'ashtim. You're going to tell him, give me 40 more, right, to complete the 100. Like they're accustomed to do. So since Tosfot is explaining to it the first explanation, so he says, therefore, halachically speaking, right, there's no difference between, right, friends or some other people. Therefore, he says, the Rosh didn't see fit to explain this in these Gemarot. That which Shmuel said, and it seems like this was the opinion of the Rif and the Rambam, the Samag also. They didn't differentiate between, right, people who are friends or some other people. So because of this, right, Rabbeinu says the Torah did not differentiate between them. Okay, so we're all equal, right? All men are created equal, right? That's what we're saying, basically, right? There's no difference between this and that. Okay, fine. So, okay, this is a long story over here we just read, right? Long story. So But the Shulchan Aruch is very short. So let's just look at it again one more time. All right, so we said in the Shulchan Aruch, I'll repeat what we said yesterday. Person shouldn't measure, right, the barley to give to his animal. So therefore, what do you do? You do estimation, right? Don't measure precisely. So that's what he's saying over here, Shulchan Aruch. And let me just check what we said before. Right, so we said in Gimel, in the Ramah, right, he alluded to this Bet Yosef that we just saw, as we mentioned yesterday, right, which is that he said that you're not allowed to do lots, draw lots on Yom Tov and Shabbat. So as we said, right, what does that mean? It means that, to draw lots to see which one will get each portion, right? In other words, like you make out a plate for everybody, right? For dinner, right? Whatever, right? So everybody has a plate, but some of them are better than others. You know what I mean? Some people get a drumstick, with a leg and a thigh. Some people get, breast, right? Right? Everybody gets a different piece there. So, so right, if they're particular, with each other, as we just said, right? So then you're not allowed to draw lots like that to see who's going to get the better piece, better portion, right? But on the other hand, right, if they're not particular, so how would that be, right? Let's say family members, right? They're not particular about this, so they're allowed to do it because they're not particular. So in other words, the prohibition only applies when you're particular about this. Nobody does this today, right? As we said, right? That's not really something very, very important for us, right? Practically speaking. Okay, fine. So bottom line, right? After we read all this, right? What's the bottom line? Let's recap, right? The whole thing here. So what we're saying is like this, right? On the one hand, we allow you to measure on Yom Tov, right, with estimation. What does that mean? You fill up the cup, whatever, that we allow. Even though it's a measuring cup, right? But now, right, getting into like, it's fine-tuned, right, measures, right? Give me this amount, give me that amount, right? Give me 1 pound, make it precise, 1 pound. Not more, not less, right? This you're not allowed to do. That's the whole thing, right? So we don't want you doing on Yom Tov precise measurements, right? That we don't want. So that's the story, more or less, right? But estimation you can do, right? So therefore, when you borrow and lend, right, to your friend, these kinds of like household items, sugar, right, flour, things like this, right? From one neighbor to the other or whatever, right? So, don't talk about like, very particular measures, Just tell them, yeah, okay, give me, like fill it up, buddy, fill it up. That's it, right? And that's good enough, right? Or give me a half, right? Whatever, that's good, But don't start getting into like particular measures. That we don't want, right? That's the way to do it. Okay, so I guess we're done with the chapter, right? So we can go on to the next one. All right, good. So as we said, right, also the same thing applies when it comes to, if you want to purchase stuff, right, on Yom Tov and Shabbat. Don't get into, these particulars, how much does it weigh, right? What's the volume, right? How many grams is it? This kinds of thing, right? How much does it cost? Getting into all these things, we don't want that stuff. So what do you do, right? If the store owner knows you already, right? He knows you're a troublemaker, right? You come in on Shabbat, right? You take his stuff, right? Some goy, let's say, right? So what do? You go in there, right? He knows you already. He knows you're a troublemaker. So you can just like show him the item, right? I'm taking this one. Okay, yeah, okay. He knows you pay him tomorrow. So if he trusts you, you can take it. No problem, right? You guys following me what I'm saying? Okay, I hope you got it. Okay. Okay, good. Somebody give me a thumbs up here. Okay, Shoshana. Okay, right. Okay, thumbs up. I like thumbs up. Okay. Very good. So I guess we'll go to the next chapter. Good. So what is the next chapter? All right, tough kuf yud chet. Okay, let's see where we're going here. 518th. Okay. Oh, right. So this is the important chapter to know. So it says the Torah like this, right? Kol hotza'ah sheyesh ba k'tzat tzorech afilu ena letzorcho, right? So it says, right, that any hotza'ah, right? What is hotza'ah? It means, carrying something in the street, right? You take it out to carry it. So it says if there's a little bit of a need, all right, even though it's not his need, right? Let's say somebody else's, right? Whatever, For what is it for? It's for a mitzvah, right? Whatever, right? Kegon katan lemulo, right? For instance, you want to circumcise your newborn son, right? The Sefer Torah likrot, right? Well, or you have Sefer Torah, right? To read the Sefer Torah. The lulav letzet bo, right? Or lulav, right? You want to shake your lulav. Mutar. All these things are allowed to carry on Yom Tov, in the street, right? No problem. Even though you don't have an eruv, right? As we mentioned already several times. Right? So it says, just like you're allowed to take it out, you're also allowed to return it home, right? You don't have to leave it in the shul, Oh, I don't need it anymore. I'll just leave it in the shul. Yeah, somebody will come and steal it, So yeah, that's very good, Hope you're happy now. And so therefore, right, we tell you, right, don't leave it in the shul. Take it home with you. There's no reason to leave it there. I know some people, like they're a little bit careless. They come to the shul, to pray, to a certain shul. And, they have their tefillin there, and they just leave their tefillin in the shul, like somebody could just come and steal it, like I don't know why people do these kinds of things. That's all, to each his own, whatever it is, right? So you should take your tefillin home, when you use it. Why leave it in the shul? What is it? It belongs to the shul, belongs to you. Hey. So that's what we're talking about, I mean? Take it home, that's the right. Because why are you taking it home? In order to guard it. That's the whole thing, right? Okay, so that's the story. וכן אם צריך ללך לבית כנסת, right, או לטייל בשמחה יום טוב, ואינו יכול להניח קטן בבית יהודי, right? So it says also, let's say he needs to go to shul, right? Or he needs to go, right, to some nice Yom Tov celebration, right? Seudah, right? He was invited. They invited him, right? Come over, right? Let's have a nice Seudah for Yom Tov. So he says, right? But the problem is, he's got a kid at home, right? He can't leave the kid at home by himself, little baby, whatever it is, right? You can take him out with him, right? Carry him over to the party, right? The Seudah. Right? Also, he says, let's say you got keys for your house, right? No problem. You can carry your keys. האוכלים, שיראה להניחו בבית, יכול להוליכו עמו, right? So it says that you're afraid to leave your house, right, unlocked, because then somebody can just waltz in, right, and take your stuff, so therefore, right, you want to lock it, you want to take it with you, the keys. כתב רבינו שמואל דווקא להוליכו בידו, אבל ברצועה כדי לאכול, לא. And so, okay, so then he gets into something else, but let's see first Bet Yosef before we go on to that other issue. So it says here, Bet Yosef, he brings a source for this, right? Perek Kama de Betzah, first Perek of Betzah, Yud Bet Amud Aleph, right over there. Tanan, there says the Mishnah there, Bet Shemai Omrim En Motziin Lo Et HaKatan Velo Et HaLulav. So Bet Shemai is stringent about this, right? He says we're not allowed to, right, take the baby out, right, to carry the baby. And that's also the Lulav. Velo Et HaSefer Torah L'Reshut HaRabim. Also, Sefer Torah, it says, right? You cannot take it out to the street. Bet Hillel Matirin. Bet Hillel allows this, right? So you can see, right? The halacha is like Bet Hillel, as usual, right? That's the way it is. There's a rule like this, you guys know, right? Usually the halacha is like Bet Hillel. So, Katav Arosh Peresh Rabbeinu Hananel, right? So, by the way, anybody know why the halacha is like Bet Hillel? Any of you ever hear about this before? I posted it one time.
Due to his humility?
Oh. So what was the humility? What was it? What, he kept his head down low when he was walking? Is that the humility?
No, I think there was a story about somebody who knocked on his door before Shabbat or something like that, and he went.
Yes. Right, but that's not really humility so much. That's like he didn't get angry, he had a calm temper, he was calm. Right? So but that's nothing to do with halakha, paskin halakha. So then what's the story? What was the humility of Bet Hillel, of Hillel? So it says in the Talmud, the humility was the way they learn Torah. There's also humility in the way you learn. What does that mean? This is a very good lesson, by the way, for everybody, to understand these things. So it says the Talmud that before they would argue their opinion, they would study the opinion of Bet Shammai first. In other words, in order to know what they're arguing with, So that's humility. Why is that humility? Because you don't come out, and jump out and say, oh, yeah, believe me when I'm telling you, I'm right and he's wrong. Before you say he's wrong, did you examine what he said? You know what I mean? That's humility, that you take the trouble to examine the other person's opinion before you present your own. That's humility in learning. You give that person the due respect he deserves, He's also a Talmid Chacham, not only you, but you're the only rabbi in town. There's also another rabbi. So listen to him what he has to say first, And don't just say, oh, that rabbi is a peasant, he doesn't know what he's talking about, Come on. Something like that, right? So the humble person, what does he do? He listens to what people have to say. Don't think you're the only rabbi in town. So that's humility. I can tell you, right, that who was the master of this in our generation? My rabbi, Maran Rabbi Shalom. He was the master of this whole concept. And that's why the halacha is like him, why? Why? Because he was also very humble. So what was the humility that the rabbi had? He was incredible, Before he would give his own opinion, you know what I mean? He would examine everybody's opinion, every rabbi, his next door neighbor, right? The guy downstairs, on the second floor. Every rabbi in town, uptown, downtown, right? Whether he's in Jerusalem or Bnei Brak, right, or wherever he may live, right? He lives in Tel Aviv, even, Tel Aviv is not known for big rabbis, but even somebody like that, right? So before he would formulate his own opinion, he would weigh all the other opinions. And by the way, this is just like, not a figment of the imagination. If you look in his books, you see that he brings all the other opinions first, and then he says, well, let me see, right? I don't agree with him, but before you say that, right, first learn what he's doing, this guy, right? Make sure you understand. Otherwise, what are you arguing with, right? What's the point? So this was, the way the rabbi did. But the incredible thing was that, he would even learn the opinion of his students, who he was much greater than them. But if they wrote a book, let's say, right, on a certain topic, he would even read their book, to see what they said, his Talmidim, So you would think, what does he have to read this guy for, He's not even, up to his toenails, what does he need to see him for? But no, the rabbi was like, I have to see that too. So that's the way he was, He saw the other opinions first. But here's the thing, right? The difference between Bet Hillel, Bet Shammai, and what the rabbi was doing is different. It's different. Why? Because the rabbi was analyzing dozens of different opinions, sometimes, or right. In other words, you're talking about dozens of rabbis. With them, it was just like Bet Hillel, Bet Shammai. That's all there was. That was the only game in town. You know what I mean? But the rabbi analyzed dozens of different opinions. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy to do that. But nevertheless, the rabbi, that's why when you learn his books, what you get is every opinion in town. You learn the whole Torah from A to Z. Because he brings everything. It's very unusual. It's like Bet Yosef, right? You see what's going on here, right? We learn. It's like Bet Yosef on steroids, Basically, the rabbi's books. If you know what I mean. So it's incredible, but this is humility. That's what it's all about, So Bet Hillel, they gave respect to Bet Shammai. Okay, let's see what you have to say. I'm all ears. Come on, tell me what you got to say. And they would analyze it, and then, right, only then to formulate their opinion. So you see from there, right, that the rule is like this, that we paskin like the rabbis who are humble. They have humility. It's not always we paskin like the biggest rabbi, the biggest scholar. No. The one who has better character, more humility, we paskin like him. Why is that? Because he takes into consideration everything. He looks at all the sides. And then he makes up his mind. Oh, that's good. That's what we want, right? So that's good advice, right? Good piece of advice. There was also another big rabbi in our generation, his name was Rav Shach, but he wasn't a posek. He was a Rosh Yeshiva, So he also had this quality of humility, the way he learned, the way he taught in his yeshiva. So there's a story like this that comes out like this, right? That one time, he came to give a class, in the yeshiva, So his favorite, topic was analyzing the Rambam, that was his favorite. That was his hobby, favorite hobby. So he would come, and analyze the Rambam's words, here, there, right, whatever. So one time, he brings, he comes in, to the and gives a lecture over to the students, right? And so what he's doing is basically he's analyzing, one opinion of the Rambam in one place, and then another place where the Rambam apparently contradicts that place. So there's a contradiction in the words of the Rambam, right? Two different places. So, what you got to do is, in a case like that, you have to reconcile, right? Somehow. Contradiction, right? So he comes in, Rav Shach, and, starts talking about this, So he figures out some, scheme, to reconcile the words of the Rambam, to fit it all in nicely, to tuck it all in, tuck it in nicely. So what happens is, right, he starts to talk about this, whatever. So one student, raises his hands, young guy, right, young fellow, younger gherkin, whatever, right, these guys. So one of them comes and says, he corrects the rabbi, he says, but didn't the Rambam, in a different place say like this and that and that? In other words, he proved to Rav Shach that he was wrong. I mean, the whole building that he built, on his theory, on his thesis, right, this Talmud just proved him in 1 second. So what would you expect him to do, right? In a case like this, the Rav Shach, what would you expect him to do, right? I'll give you some choices, right? A, B, and C, right? Should he right, put the Talmud in his place, and tell him, who are you to argue with me, Is that a good choice? Choice A. That's not a good choice, right? Because, you're being like, you're being like arrogant, like, who are you to argue with me? Who are you to tell me anything, Who are you and who am I, Come on, that's not a good choice, right? So he didn't do that. So, right, or then you have the other choice, he can try to, try to prove his side of it, and whatever, make an argument, present an argument for his side, But the truth is, he didn't do any of the above. So what did he do? Because he realized, that this Talmud outsmarted him, he was wrong. His whole thesis was wrong. I mean, and that thesis was the basis of his lecture. So, so what does he do, right, Rav Shach? He closes the Gemara, the Rambam, right? Closes it shut, and he says, this is all that I've said. He says it's all wrong. He says, says we'll end the lecture here. So he just walks out, and goes home. That was it, right? That was the whole thing, So, that's also humility, right? Why is that humility? First of all, he didn't, put that Talmud down, and put him in his place, because there was no reason to do that. He was right. That's one thing, right? The Talmud outsmarted him, What can you do? That's the way it goes. So, sometimes it happens. Happens to the best of us. So, right, the humility here was that thing, They didn't, he didn't right, put his Talmud down, because he realized that he was right. But besides that, there was another thing, which is that once he heard that the Rambam himself contradicted what he was trying to say, to reconcile, right, the Rambams. Once he realized that the Rambam himself didn't say like that, he didn't want to argue with the Rambam. It's like, so he said, "I'm wrong." If the Rambam says not like that, obviously I'm wrong. Get the point, right? That's the whole thing, right? So that's humility and learning. That's the way a person has to be. So when a person is humble and learning, Hashem, brings them up, like raises them up to be the leader. Why? Because Hashem says, "Yeah, you're a humble guy. I like you. You're not so quick to, put other people down. There's one guy, I'm not going to mention his name. You know what he says, right? Always on the internet. This guy, right? He calls himself a rabbi. I'm not sure if he's a rabbi, but he says, right? Whoever doesn't agree with me, he's not a rabbi. He's a fake rabbi. Why do you talk like that? What's it with you? You're such a big chacham, that anybody who doesn't agree with you is a fake rabbi. He's corrupted. Why do you say these things? Like, what kind of person are you? Where do you come from? A person like that, just the opposite of what we just said, Everybody who doesn't agree with me, I got to put him down. He's no good. That guy's no good. Why is he no good? Why? What happened? Actually, the truth is he's better than you, But you say he's no good. Why? He doesn't agree with me. The ego, right, comes, there's no place for that in learning, The ego. There's no place for that. Especially when you don't even know what you're talking about. That's for sure, right? We're not going to mention any names. Shh. Okay, so anyway, right, getting back to what we said. So that's how we passed like Bet Hillel, because they were human, they were humble. Same thing, by the way, also, right? I read a book about this, one time, that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he wanted to, in 500 years ago, when the Shulchan Aruch was written, he wanted to unite all the, various different opinions, and bring them into one united opinion. So he had this idea, Hashem, I want somebody, I want to pick some rabbi to write the Shulchan Aruch, put everything together. Bet Yosef, Shulchan Aruch, right? Put it all together. Unite the opinions into one. So, apparently there was a few candidates, Hashem was thinking about, to take this job. So they mentioned a few names, and I think they were all named Yosef, right? They all had the same name, Yosef, right? Because he wanted to call the Bet Yosef. So, go figure, right? So anyway, they're all Yosef. But so then why was Rabbi Yosef Karo picked out from all these Yosefs? So same thing, right? They say because he was humble. I mean, where do you see the humility of the Bet Yosef, right? In the introduction, he writes over there, right? That he says, I'm not coming here to decide that which of the Rishonim are right or wrong. He says, I'm not on the level to do that. I'm not gonna decide who's right. Rashba is right and Ritva is wrong. How do you know that? He says, I don't know how to decipher these things. So I'm not on a level to do that. You think I'm on a level of Rishonim? So he says, therefore, what I'm going to do, I'm going to do 2 out of 3. I'm going to take the majority, right? The big 3 guys, take 2 out of 3 and go like that. That's going to be my system. I'm not going to decide who's right and wrong. So I'm not on a level to do that. That's also, right, same thing, humility, you know what I mean? You say to yourself, I'm not on that level to decide. So Hashem likes humble people. He elevates the humble. That's what it is, That's the whole story. Okay, so you get the idea, right? Okay. I think it was worthwhile to mention this idea, A good piece of musar, right? Okay. So anyways, we're going to go on. So it's Katav Rosh Perush Rabbeinu Hananel, right? Says the Rosh, the Rach explains Katan lemulo lulav letzitbo, right? So we're talking about a child, right? To circumcise him, or a lulav, right? To use a lulav on Yom Tov. All right. So it says Sefer Torah likrot bo, or Sefer Torah to read with it. The Talmud de Bet Hillel. So it's the reason of Bet Hillel, the sharu that they allow this. Like Mefaresh B'Gemara explains the Gemara. Mefarish b'Gemara that mitomech she'utra hotzat l'tzorech utra l'shalom tzorech. So since it was allowed to carry for the need, it's also allowed to carry for not a need. So he says b'mitoch ela davar shehu l'tzorech k'tzat. But he says it has to be a little bit of a need there, something, a little bit of a need. אלא דבר שהוא צורך קצת, כגון הנח שהם לצורך מצווה. So like these things, which were for mitzvah's sake, mitzvah matter, right? But Rabbeinu Tam Piresh, so Rabbeinu Tam explains, the lav dafka lemulo, so it's not only to circumcise, אלא הוא הדין נמי אם צריך ללך לבית הכנסת. Same thing will also apply when he needs to go to shul, לשמחת יום טוב, right? To go to, right, some Yom Tov party, right, whatever. You cannot leave the child at home, right, by himself. So you can carry him. Also take books with them, right? To the synagogue. And also to return them home. Right? Because they allowed the end because of the beginning, right? To return them. It says in Yerushalmi, Bet Shammai says, right? They don't allow the key. Bet Hillel matinin, and the Bet Hillel allows the key, right? As we said, right? Amar Yoshaya, Barab Yitzchak, Hadad etema memafteach shel ochalin. And so says this rabbi, that what you said, right, regarding food, about the mafteach, regarding food. But he says when it comes to a key, shel kelim, right, which is for utensils, lo, not so, he says. V'harabi abu yativ umatre umaftechat de palterin bide pilpelin havele behabade. So he says, right, that, but wow, but that doesn't it say that they're in the Talmud, right, that they allowed the key? So he says, but that was, together with some food. So it says in the Tshuva of the Geonim, right, that every carrying, right, taking out in the street, regarding right, so it says that Mishum Achilat, that's allowed because of eating. It's also allowed because of certain ornaments. Mishum Kavod Yom Tov, because of the respect of Yom Tov, right? Honor of Yom Tov. But it says if it's not for the sake of eating, and also there's no ornament there. For instance, that they're going out with their keys, right, in their belt, right? They have that those key belts, right? So they're not. That's not proper to what they're doing. He says, not allowed to do that. It says, that's the way they pass in the two yeshivot. He says, right? What yeshivot are they talking about here? Right? They were talking about the Geonim over here, right? So the Geonim, they were in Iraq, just like the Talmud, right? So they still had those yeshivot there from the Talmud, right? What yeshivot are we talking about? Surah and Pumbedita, right? Those two yeshivot were still there. So that's what he's talking about here, right? Those two yeshivot. Right? That's what the Rosh says. The Gamaran Katav Ad Yerushalmi the Kamar Adad the Tema Maftech Shel Ochalin Aval Shel Kelim Lo. So he also says, right, the Ran, that we allow for food, right, keys for food, but not keys for ornaments. Lo mashma de lav davka ochalin ela hu adin kelim. So Ran says no, we even allow for ornaments, right, even for utensils. Shesh behem tzorech leom, that there's a need for them during the day. The mafteach shel kelim. So he says, right, the key for the utensils, the kamar, the lo hainu kelim she'en liyom tzorech behem. So he says, I'm not talking about something which is not needed. That's the end of it. The kachem divrei Rabbeinu. Let's see what else in the tour. The Katuah Tosfot. So it says in Tosfot, B'Shem Rabbeinu Tam. Name Rabbeinu Tam. Davka katan demulo. So that's only talking about, as we said, a child, right? To circumcise him. The hu adin shelo lemulo. So the same thing also applies not to circumcise him. The shara, it's allowed. Gam tiul, right? It's also, it says regarding also, going, right, traveling around, right, going for a stroll, right? Deha yeshkachan nami the misachakin bekadur shekorim pluta. So there's also they play with a ball which is called pluta. B'yom tov and yom tov b'rishut rabim, in the public domain. Even though that's only just strolling around, as we said, right? Okay, let's see how much we got here to go. Maybe we'll stop here. Yeah, there's still a lot more to go, so I guess we'll continue tomorrow. Another show. Okay, very good. So, Bezrat Hashem, we'll continue next time. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Chazak Baruch, Laila Tov. And we'll get back into it, Bezrat Hashem, next time. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.
God bless.